call the meeting to order. Would you please take roll?
Ms. Atkins. Here. Mr. Hendricks. Here. Mr. Houston. Mrs. McDaniel. Mr. Stoffer.
Here.
Mr. Wylage. Here. Mrs. Sheffel.
Here. Can I get a motion to approve the August 16th, 2021 agenda? Is there any discussion?
Just want to mention that when we have our open enrollment in closed session, we actually have 4, so there will be an A, B, C, and D
Okay.
that we will visit. So just wanted to make that clear before we got into the agenda, since it wasn't 4 when the agenda was finalized, but it has grown to 4. So.
All right. Is there any other discussion? Vote, please.
Ms. Atkins.
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks.
Yes.
Mr. Stoffer.
Yes.
Mr. Wylage.
Yes.
Mrs. Sheffel.
Yes. Commendation and good news.
Don't have a lot for you tonight. We're really gearing up. Dave and I were just talking prior to the meeting, and I think the one thing we do want to mention is exciting time of year. It's always kind of breathe life back into the district as you see things starting to, rebirth into the new year. And Dr. Jones was hosting our 17 new teachers today. We all got to say hello to them this morning and welcome them. They appear eager. Some admittedly feel like they've jumped out of a car going 70 miles an hour, but we all know that feeling. We've been through that multiple times in our careers, and we know that's if you're not feeling that way, then we should probably worry, because that's a normal feeling, but within reason. And I also talked with our nurses today. I'm talking with our bus drivers tomorrow, and of course we have our full teacher return on Thursday. So it's here. We're gearing up. People seem refreshed. People seem excited, and we're excited as well. So that's really what's occupying our time right now. But it's good news to again, to see that life come back into the district, and even more so when you see the kids.
Absolutely. Okay, anyone else? Good news? All right, we'll go on to comments and suggestions. This is the portion of our agenda that anyone can address the board, either in our audience or online. And there are no comments online, so we'll go on to consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Any discussion? Do we have an updated personnel sheet?
We do. There are 3 additional classified to employ listed there. There are 3 additional classified resignations. 1 additional classified staff change. And we are bringing forward horizontal movement on the salary schedule as well. So all of these staff members will move horizontally this year. There are 24 of them.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Hendricks.
Yes.
Mr. Houston.
Yes.
Mr. Stoffer.
Yes.
Mr. Wylage.
Yes.
Ms. Atkins.
Yes.
Mrs. Sheffel.
Yes. Reports. 6.01 curriculum report.
Yeah, so excited tonight to have Dr. Jones with us. She and I had a conversation, I think, May-ish. And we talked about the concept of something of the way of an annual curriculum report, and some of that I think we even discussed as a board in some of our conversations. And there's always a lot going on. We have great leadership from Dr. Jones, and her expertise is very much appreciated, not only by me, but really everyone in the district. So we didn't want to minimize the report. We talked about what to call it, and we said, let's just call it a curriculum report, and maybe establish this is something that we do at least annually, of course, unless there are other things to bring as we normally would. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Jones.
All right, thank you, Dr. Knost. First of all, thanks for hosting me tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to come and meet with you folks. Dr. Knos did talk about the why and the why now. The why now, I feel like if we would have set this up for June, I wouldn't have been ready, for one. But even more than that, June's pretty late, early to think about the upcoming year, right? We're all gearing down from the prior year, so it felt like it would be a better fit for as we began school. So August was the date, and I thought it was a great idea in April or May because I had 3 or 4 months to think about it, right? And then it just happens that it's on the same day as our new teachers coming back. So it's been an interesting whirlwind for not just our new teachers, but for me as well, just getting ready for everything that I have going on. So basically there's 3 areas that I'm going to highlight for this particular update. And thinking about that, if there are things for the next update, or if you want something in between, a mid-year update, if you just let Dr. Knos know, that would be awesome. I want to share what you want to hear about, but also those things that I think are important for us to make sure our board is aware of. So the 3 bullets, I guess you'd call those, are resource adoptions and reviews. Our curriculum site, which is a site that I ended up developing because some things that we had purchased in our past to help with our electronic unit development wasn't really doing what we needed it to do. So it's like I thought there had to be a better way. Long story short, I did find a better way with the help of a lot of people that know how to do programming, scripting. So you'll see it, but realize that it's on the shoulders of many people that I don't even know because I belong to this group that has been a great benefit. Also, a couple of changes that are going to take place. You're going to hear about those as we end the report tonight. So go ahead. So starting off with resource review. We didn't skip one, right? Or did you go too fast? Okay. I just saw something else pop up for a second there. Sorry, Dave. I thought it was important for you folks to know how we do this, and I've done this for probably 4 to 5 years now with different groups of content areas. And so the idea of what drives our decisions, we many years ago went away from a cycle of renewal. So we used to have teachers gather in the summer, write units of instruction, say this is my year to purchase, and so whether or not we actually needed it, we purchased new materials for that particular group, opposed to looking at our data and saying what makes sense for us to focus on this year. So thinking about best practice of instruction, there's been some changes in our instruction for best practices where our resources weren't the best fit anymore. So that's another thing that we look at as I look at where are we going to spend our efforts this year. Also policies, whether it's our Lewis Central policies or the law changes, we have a law that is actually taking effect. We have to have our plan in place. I think it's July of 2022 for computer science K-12. And so that might, in the next year, make a difference in some of the way we spend our resources. What might we need to increase in our middle school and our elementaries in particular. So things like that we always have to be aware of. And then just additional changes, like we have our Performing Arts Center being built, right? And I already know that Mr. Straight, our drama speech person, has talked with Joel, Dr. Bienhoff, about looking at additional kinds of classes that we could offer, like set construction, things like that haven't been possible with our setup before that. So also looking at just changes within our district that are happening that allows us to look at other opportunities. Process-wise, the way we've gone about developing is instead of starting with our resources are old, we need resources, we start with a group of teachers getting together over the course of usually about a year, and we start with a program level point of view. And we look at, for our program, what needs to be in place that we don't have in place, what needs to be updated. So standards are pretty much given to us by the state for most of our content areas. So that's not really an issue, but the idea of what's our vision, obviously inspiring excellence throughout the whole district, but in social studies, what does that look like? Or in mathematics, what does that look like for us as we teach mathematics? So we really look at what's the vision or philosophy for that particular program and make sure it's in alignment with our district philosophy or our district mission. We also review the Iowa law. The cheat sheet for me is chapter 12, but it has a more official name, 281.12 perhaps. But it's that idea of what do all public schools need to have in place and at what particular grade levels or spans. And then we also look at understanding by design, designing backwards at the program level. So if we think about something that we want to be coherent from 12th grade down to kindergarten, what does it look like overall for a whole program? And so what enduring understandings and essential questions can we always point back to? So if a teacher is planning for kindergarten, whatever they come up with, if you will, for an enduring understanding, does that tether back to what we expect for that whole program to reach by the time they're graduating? So we look at all of that at the program level first, and then we go to the course at the grade level, and you'll see that it looks very much the same, only we're taking those program level, that program level lens and breaking it down into at least grade spans, if not more than that. So it's grade level and or course level at the secondary. Along with that, then we also look at what are the ways that we're going to assess at that point. We want to look at common assessments. So in our mathematics program at grade 5, what are some benchmark type assessments that we're going to make sure that all students take, so we have that set of data that regardless of the teacher, we can look at it and say our students are doing this towards the program and towards those enduring understandings that we are putting out there. We don't do that at the program level, so that's an added piece at the grade level. And then this is where all of us, when we get together in our meetings, this is where all of us want to start. We want to start at the unit level, at the what's happening in my classroom level, kind of force them to put the brakes on a little bit and come back to that program level first, where in the end, most of them will come around and say, I really appreciated doing that. Yet at the time that we went back and looked at the program level, it was like, oh my gosh, I just want to know what's going to happen in my classroom. So even though it feels like a step in the wrong direction, starting with the end in mind for the whole program for our students when they graduate really makes a lot of sense. And when we're all done, I think teachers for the most part believe in that as well. Let's see. And this, the only other point I wanted to point out in stage 3 here is that this is when we actually do the resource review. So all that other work that I just mentioned throughout the last 5 minutes, that's not looking at resources. We gather some resources as we go because teachers hear from other teachers and from other programs across the nation even, something that's working really well for them. And so our teachers are going to say, I want to see that. Let's take a look at it. So we put it down on a resource page so we don't lose it, so we can go back to our work with program level and grade level information. So once we get to that stage 3 and we say, here's the best practice instruction, here's where we want our kids to be in the end, here's pretty much the idea of how we're going to assess they get there, then we say, what are we going to have those students do? How are our teachers going to support them? And then what resources would be best to do that? And that's where we actually go for resources. And not always is it a paid resource, although it still costs money when you think about it's not a paid resource like illustrative math. But if you recall last year, I came before you guys and asked for some funding so that we could put together some, whether it's a manipulative that they need in the classroom or a set of cards that they need to manipulate with the kids. We've been creating those over the summer. That's where the money that, well, you can see it around our boardroom here. We're not quite finished with 2.5, but that's where some of those funds go into, and also into the PD. And I'm not sure where appropriate place for questions might be. This is the first report like this that I've given to you folks. So I'm not sure if I go ahead and take questions as we go. If you want me to stop and in between, I'm fine with any piece that you want me to do.
I think the board be comfortable asking Dr. Jones at any point in time, but definitely at the end, we can see if there are any.
Awesome, because I'm kind of
cumulative-
watching, seeing if I can see some questions going on. I don't see any.
Assessments, how many people are involved?
With the assessment
Well,
piece?
just through that journey that you're just kind of talking about, going all the way down.
Ooh,
to the
from
level.
program level to, let's say from program to course/grade level. It does depend on which content we're talking about. So like world languages, all of them are.
Okay.
But if it's a K-12 or a 6-12 situation even, or a K-5, I would say a good dozen to 18 probably. When we get to the unit piece, which was that last piece, almost all of our teachers are involved in that. After reviewing what our core committee has done.
Very good.
All right, going on to that next or I'm sorry, we're still on the same bullet, aren't we? Few of the tools, I do think it's something to share with you. Obviously, we use the tools that are at the state level as far as making sure that we're following guidelines, the constraints or criteria that we need to follow, make sure that's part of our curriculum, et cetera. We also do a couple of other things, whether you've seen these or not before, edreports.org, it's really, you don't have to necessarily go there, Dave. It's linked if you wanted to. But what that is a national site made up of a lot of teacher reviewers that will go through different publishers of the resources, publishers, like Illustrative Math, which is what we are using, has Kendall Hunt as a publisher that also has LearnZillion as a vendor for them, and there's another one that's a provider for them. And what EdReports will do, and that core group of teacher reviewers do, is they take this massive review tool, which we've used in our past, and that's why I like looking at EdReports. It's massive to go through. It takes hours and hours to go through one resource to go through the review process with it. They do all that. So we don't take it at carte blanche, but we do look at it and we say, if they've done Illustrative Math and our publisher that we're going through is Kendall Hunt, what did they think of it? Let's download their report and see if we agree. So it really cuts our time a lot in reviewing a resource and know that it's going to be a quality review. So that's what EdReports will do for us. They do a lot with English language arts and also with math, and they've just started in the last couple of years to do science. Not high school, I've noticed, but K-8 in science. And that's one of those that we'll have coming up later is science. And then if we don't have EdReports to go to, I also have a general resource evaluation tool that's modeled after theirs. It's not near as in depth, but we do look at it and say, you know what, if it doesn't meet the first piece of the criteria, then we don't look for that resource any farther. So go ahead and click. So when we look at a set of resources, this is what we look at in that order. So the first thing we look at is alignment, the alignment with district, state, national standards, competencies, and skills. There are some content areas, especially at the high school, that instead of having state sets of standards, we have national standards, we have industrial competencies and skills to look towards. But if a resource doesn't align there, the rest of it doesn't matter. So it can be really pretty, or it could be really fancy and have lots of online bells and whistles, but if it doesn't meet that first one, we don't even evaluate it any further. It doesn't make sense to. But then we look at it after that and say, what does the content look like? Does it meet our standards content-wise? Does it meet the idea of understanding by design thinking, which is kind of important for us. Our whole philosophy of what we do is based on backwards design. And it's really neat that a lot of our resources that we're looking at now build that in. So that's one of those things that we look at is, do they have the the enduring understandings or the essential questions already there for us? And we don't have to create them. We can cull them from them, tweak them if we want to. And then we look past that for the other things. And I believe that takes us through our resource review. you can see the ones that we've done recently, and you probably remember in your past looking through those adoptions with me. Also, new on the horizon, just do one click and you'll get new on the horizon that you'll see probably this year is science and secondary language arts. If you recall, I told you at the beginning, excuse me, that we don't have a cycle anymore, which we don't. So we don't do every 7 years. However, when we did math and social studies and these two, science and language arts, we actually found that we are constrained a bit because we did our online access, right? And publishers have gotten swabby over their time and said, we're gonna pay for those subscriptions. You have to pay for those subscriptions every year. And when we bought our science and English language arts, we bought a 6-year subscription. So our subscription is sunsetting in May, June, July, December for some of them. So we want to be proactive and start looking at what's out there now that's going to meet our needs. So again, you'll probably see science and language arts come through later this year as our committees work on that. Yeah, you did. Okay. Curriculum site. Just briefly, Dave, if you do one more click here, it shows a picture of our curriculum site, and I'm going to have you go there. You don't have to like play around in it or anything, but if you just click on it and go there, this is after we've done all of our work that you've heard about thus far. Eventually, it gets housed here for us so that anybody in our lewiscentral.org domain can browse all of our units. If you're a kindergarten teacher and you want to see what 8th grade science is doing, you can go see an 8th grade science unit. The one caveat is it is a lewiscentral.org protected environment, and we do that purposefully, so it's not open to the public. And again, we do that purposefully because there are some things in our units that are linked that are copyrighted. We have access, we can use them legally, etc. However, if it's open to the public, there may be some things that we might be sharing against copyright. Also, there are assessments that are tethered in there or are linked in there, and those are things that our teachers want protected as well. So while it's accessible to any of us, it's not accessible to the general public. If they tried to go to this Google site, it would look like a broken link. It just wouldn't be available. I would love it if Google Sites would figure out how to do their pages to be open to the public and some other pages not. Because if you'll go back to that home page, again, you don't have to, oops, nope, the home page of the site, so sorry. What I'm looking for is the sidebar. All right, thank you so much. If you scroll down that, you don't have to click into any of them, but if you scroll down that, there are some things that would be nice to have open to all of us, public-wise, because the idea of our standards, I have all of our standards housed here for easy access for our teachers and whatnot. And if Google Sites will become, hopefully it'll happen someday, I'll be able to open that particular web page on this site publicly so that everybody can see what our standards are. Obviously, they can come and see our standards. However, it'd be nice to have them open this way as well. And hopefully I've given you the reasoning to not have it open because of our units. Our units of instruction, though, for our teachers, if you go over there and look at our worries for our new teachers coming in, we did an activity this morning as we started the day, and we just said, what are your hopes for the year, or maybe for these 2 days that you're with me? What are your hopes? And then also, what are your worries? What are you most worried about? And the very top, if you go over there and look, I believe it's the top getter, is they're worried about being able to see the curriculum soon enough. That's their worry. Am I going to be able to get to my curriculum so that I can get prepared for those kids on day one? Well, first of all, we'll ease their minds a little bit tomorrow and tell them that they probably are not going to start heavy into curriculum the first day. It's probably going to be more around routines that we want our students to have, et cetera. So, but being able to access their curriculum is important to them. So being able to access it through this site is something that they have found value in today already. All right, questions about anything there? There's more to it, but that's the highlights of the site, and it's very much more accessible to teachers, which was our barrier in the other two products that we had tried over the last, I want to say 15 years probably. And there were just too many barriers between the usability of it and the value they found in it, et cetera. But this is a different case.
Do we have access to that?
If you are signed in with your Chrome browser as your Lewis Central email account, if it's at the @lewiscentral.org, yes, you do. And I don't know the answer to this one, Dave. When they are on their Chrome browser, do they have the LC folder? Okay, then the way you would access it is to go to our website, and there's a place where it says for staff. And I know there is a place that says for staff.
Right.
My wonder is, are you able to access the for staff bullets? And I think you can. Thank you. And there's a curriculum site button there.
Thank you.
Others, anything else? Then I'll finish up here. Okay, the last two points are some changes that are going to be coming up this year. One of them is around math acceleration at the middle school. For the last several years, our acceleration has taken place, unless it was an exceptional case. The acceleration has taken place, or an option to, has happened at 7th grade. You could go from 6th grade to advanced 7th grade math, or from 5th grade to advanced 7th grade math. That's what it's been like for the last few years. What we have changed to this year, and if you'll click one time, is an acceleration option in grade 6. So as they come from 5th grade, we're looking at some criteria through test scores to accelerate them in 6th grade. One of the reasons why is because, as this chart would show you, what our standards have done, our Iowa core standards that we have in place now, what they have done is it's taken a lot of the things that probably you and me, going through high school even, were worried about as a high school freshman, maybe a sophomore, taking algebra for the first time. And a lot of those concepts, which are in the blue, red, and green, were only at the high school level, maybe at the 8th grade level. And all of those ideas have been pushed down in the grades, if you will, to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So instead of our 6th and 7th grade students, as happened in our past, actually just going through the same material, different year, different look, different teacher, but same material, all this information that started in 8th grade has now been pushed to 6th grade. So they don't have the repetition that they used to have when we have our Iowa core standards. So one of the reasons we're looking at that acceleration option in grade 6 is because we know that there's not the repetition that some grade levels had in our past. Another reason we're doing it also is with our move to illustrative math for a resource. There's not an advanced 7th grade course in that particular set of resources. So when we look at that, it's us looking at it and saying, how are we going to take 7th grade and 8th grade in that illustrative math and create a course through going through those two resources, those two grade levels of resources to create this course. Or we could look at what illustrative math has done and look at where they've accelerated, and they have a paper that talks about the whys around why do this in 6th grade, and we can use their resource that they've packaged where they take standards from grade 6 and 7 and accelerate them into a part of all of grade 6 and part of grade 7 into grade 6, all of grade 7 and the rest of, part of grade 7 and all of grade 8 packaged into grade 7, so that they'll be very ready for that algebra course in 8th grade. they'll have all of those standards instead of skipping standards, which is what it used to be in when we had Advanced 7. So we looked at it and we said, what makes the most sense? What do the experts say? What does best practice say? And we are making this switch, starting this year. And right now, we have about 18 to 20 kids that are enrolled in it right now, as going from grade 5 to grade 6 into an accelerated grade 6 course. We also have a few others that we're looking at that are, when you look at the criteria that we have, and we've put together that criteria just as we had before, they looked like they were right on the border, right there on the bubble. And so I've asked Mrs. Reynolds and the math and tag instructor to look at those particular kids too. So that's a change that we're making this year. Questions or comments on that one? I think that's the end of that particular one. So the last change, and again, probably these last two things are what Dr. Canos probably remembers me coming to him and saying, do you think our board should know about that? Do you think our board would want to hear about this? And so because of all of those little things, it's like, why not just do an update? So the last thing I want to share with you is we are also doing a change in our K-5 report cards. It may not look like a large change when face value when you look at it, but we've done a lot of work in 6 months with a core group of teachers. I'd say probably about 18 teachers and admin put together, coming in after school for a couple hours, 2 or 3 times a month. And we looked at this and said, what would this look like? And it came from our teachers and our parents and our administrators, new ones coming into our district, saying, why don't we have something that's coherent from K till 5? Why does it change at grade 2, et cetera, et cetera? So that's what led to our desire to do this. So we started with a purpose. And once we had our purpose for our report card that we all agreed with, consensus-wise, then the rest of this has gone relatively smoothly, with taking these two ideas and merging them together into something better and bigger than it was independently. So that's our purpose for our K-5 report card. And from that, just a few of the highlights, because I know I'm getting way over time, Dr. Canos.
No, you're fine.
Okay. Let's see, where's it at? Just want to make sure I'm not missing something. Okay. Once we had our purpose, everything kind of fell in place, but we had some systematic things to go through that we wanted to make sure that we had in place. Part of it was, instead of a 3-point marking system for Cruft and a 4-point marking system for Titan Hill, we now have a 4-point system for all grade levels in all content areas. And if you are familiar with our Titan Hill report card, we had a different marking system for some of our content areas than we had for other content areas. And there was a lot of question as to why, you know, those kinds of things. So again, we made this switch, redefined what a 4-3-2-1 is all about. And hopefully it'll be more descriptive for our parents. We've had one set of parents look at it already through Cruft, gave us some feedback on it, so we've changed a little bit of the structure, but it's still 4 points. We also looked at a new idea called reporting standards. Again, it may not seem like a difference, but the standards that you see on the report card are not all inclusive, right? If you've been through our report cards, you have like, what, 6 maybe for math and 10 or 12 for literacy, things like that. That's not all of our standards. And so what we've done is we've said, we've been conscientious about, here's the standards that we're going to report to. And sometimes that reporting standard maybe even represents multiple standards over here that we are instructing to. And so we've taken all of our curriculum standards in the background and we've aligned them to those reporting standards. So again, for parents looking at the report card, it may not seem like a big deal, but on the backside, we have a lot of confidence in knowing that if our students are meeting these at a 3 or a 4, that they're meeting all the standards that we're responsible for with them. So that's a really big deal on the back end of this, to know that those are all connected together. Additional description, we've created around what were called work habits, and they call them now guidelines to success, because it's bigger than work. It's about how to behave, if you will, as a responsible person. In fact, one of those work habits / guidelines is responsibility. So how are you responsible, and what does that look like? And so we've added additional description around what responsible looks like at first grade compared to what responsible looks like at fifth grade. So they'll be able to say if it's a 2 or a 1, and a parent looks at that, and before it was just said responsible. Oh, you got to be better at being responsible, son or daughter. Now we can look at it, or the parent can look at it and say, oh, if I had a 1 in responsible, that means that you maybe aren't doing these particular things as much as you should be in the classroom. And so then I can, as a parent, I can help reinforce what they need to do at school. And then the last but not least is the vertical complexity of the standards is evident. And I do have one simple example of that. And here are some reporting standards across literacy. And the first one's kindergarten. Gets a little more sophisticated in grade 2. And then grade 3, there's a little bit of a difference there even. It's not just a topic, it's a main idea, which is a little bit deeper concept than topic. And then by the time they get to 5th grade, this is what that standard morphs into. So just from asking questions and answering questions with support, by the time they're 5th grade, we can see what their experiences need to look like. So that's kind of neat too, that we can see that vertical complexity. If you have a student, if you have multiple students in our K-5 program, and you look at those report cards, you'll see a lot of connection between the two, which is awesome. And I think that might be it, Dave. No, not quite, thank you. Thanks for everything that you folks do. It's so much appreciated when we come here and we talk and we ask for different things and we share with you what we have. We appreciate it, so thank you. And if you do have additional questions, I'll take them.
Does anyone have any questions? Well, for your first report on this,
Bravo.
good job.
Thank you.
Because, I mean, it was so informative that, you know, that spells things out and see the changes that are being made. Because when you sit here at the board, you might see it, but then to remember it too. So this is something
Yes.
that's really great.
Thank you, thanks. Appreciate that feedback.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jones.
All right, we have the 6.02 ESSER 3 and return to learn plans.
Yes, so this is, we're going to go through these things and do an overarching review, if you will, on these two topics, and I'll explain a little bit about why that's necessary and what to expect. And you probably did notice that even though we're doing this in report form, I am asking, our very last action item tonight is for the board to do approval of these two. Not entirely clear if the formality that needs to happen, but I think even symbolically it makes sense for us to show that the board is supporting this work. So to start, first to help everyone understand that this really comes out of a requirement that for ESSER 3 reimbursements, in a minute I'm going to give a review of the stimulus plans, but for ESSER 3 reimbursements to the school district, the state has determined a few things that need to happen. One of those is we have to give input, we have to receive input and feedback, and we have to share some things publicly, which is what we were planning on doing. But what they've also asked, you have to realize that the stimulus money begins at the federal level, comes through the state. So there are some requirements that may not make complete sense to every state in the union, but they are there because it is collectively a federal requirement. For example, they require schools to create a return to learn plan. Now you can think for a minute why that is, because there are schools within the 50 United States that are just now returning to learn. And so they wanted to make it a requirement for you to receive reimbursement on the stimulus dollars for expenses. They wanted to make sure that there was a bona fide return to learn plan. Early on, what Iowa and the Department of Ed would say to superintendents is, we don't have to worry about that. We've already done that. We've already returned to learn. If you remember, we were required by statute last year to return in-person learning. So, but as things have kind of rolled out, they realized this was still an example. So the requirement is that we have to continue with our return to learn plan. We have to keep it published, and we have to review it on occasion. So we have been in the process of that in many of the weeks here in the summer. And so that's why we're going to touch on both today. So I want to start with ESSER, and I want to remind folks that as we call it ESSER, which stands for, I always have to look at my notes, Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund. Now, we call this ESSER 3, but if we back up, the very first stimulus package that came out was the CARES Act, which was the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, the CARES Act. When that came out, by the way, we were given an allocation and the money was sent to us. And then we were at our own, I hate to say free will, because there were definitely restrictions of what we could buy with the money, but we were on our own to determine how best to utilize that money within the needs of the pandemic situation. The second round that came out is when they started with the ESSER, the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, and it was really the CARES Act 2, but they renamed it ESSER. And then the third round that came out, which we call ESSER 3, we didn't deem that, really here in our state anyway, and I guess federally, the governmental agencies have deemed it ESSER 3. But it's really the ARP, the American Rescue Plan. So you can really get lost in all those acronyms if you're not careful knowing what's from where. It's basically been 3 stimulus packages that have came forth. And the last 2, including this one, is on a reimbursement basis. So we do not house the money in our coffers. We have an allotment that we can ask for reimbursements. Those reimbursements need to be approved by the state, and they need to meet federal guidelines. So that's what ESSER is. In the third round here, there were a couple of additional requirements. 20% of the money spent has to be spent on learning loss. The allocations have to be directly for learning loss, and Andrea's going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then the other 80% are just considered allowable expenses that that we have to follow some guidelines, and again, to get reimbursements for. Now, just to give you perspective, you probably remember that early on when we were allocated $1.8 million for ESSER 3, a lot of the guidelines didn't come forth with it. We knew it was going to be reimbursable, or achieved through reimbursements that were approved, but we started planning immediately based on our needs with COVID. You may recall that we added staff. We came to the board and we asked for approval to add certain temporary positions. Some of those were admin interns, in one case some additional teachers, an additional counselor. And then after the fact, somewhere along the way, we got a notice, I believe on a Thursday, SBOs and superintendents said, we need to meet with you tomorrow about ESSER 3. And then after the fact, all of these additional requirements were put in that talked about the 20% learning loss allocations. Some of those things where there's certain staff that do apply, certain that don't. We kept enough flexibility in there where we're okay. We could move some things around. But let me give you an example. There are some school districts, for instance, that jumped right off, started doing their planning, and added a bunch of staff that they were going to take care of that would have been in the 20%. and for a huge chunk decided to do HVAC projects all through their school, revamp all of the HVAC in their building. That's a lot in a very small district with not a big ESSER allocation. They went and they contracted. After the fact, they came back after they had made staff hires. They didn't have the flexibility on the HVAC, the 80%. And they're really struggling to figure out how they get those approvals for staff that don't really necessarily fit the description for the 20% learning loss allocations. We have flexibility in ours. So when we started learning the definitions and what is allowable, and some of that is still coming out. We're still getting guidelines a week before school starts on what we need to do. But Andrea's done a great job of keeping flexibility to where we can adjust and make it work for us. So that's the concept of what ESSER 3 is. In about 30 seconds, I'm going to turn over to Andrea to talk through the overarching details of that, and then so you know what's to come. As I said earlier, for us to be eligible for our reimbursements, we have to keep our Return to Learn plan published. So it has been updated. I'll come back, talk through those overarching updates. We'll end with any questions that the board may have, and then we'll move on from there. So. Well, are there any questions thus far before we have Andrea talk just about the process? And okay, Andrea.
All right, so as you can see up there, our ESSER 3 total allocation is a little above the $1.9 million. This slide also shows the minimum to address learning loss, which is 20%, so a little over $382,000. And then the other is the maximum reservation for our other allowable activities, the 80%, so a little over the $1.5 million. This next slide here shows what we would be spending our 20% for the addressing learning loss. We have some summer school programs, $100,000 allocated to that, another $100,000 allocated to online curriculum and virtual learning solutions, and the high school additional counselor for the 21-22 and the 22-23 school year. So the total budgeted to address learning loss is $386,000. That additional high school counselor is one that will help with some of our high school students that fell behind during the closure and this past school year, so they can be on track to graduate.
We have a few more fifth-year seniors due to the close down last year and the whole coronavirus. So that is a bona fide need, and we are happy that is allowable in the 20% learning loss piece. That's the one staff piece that we did include in that 20%. But you can see people see big sums of money like that and they think, boy, you're going to be able to buy all kinds of stuff. Well, to some degree, it depends how you look at it, but you can eat it up really fast on what some of these things are. I'll touch on this a little later when we talk more in the Return to Learn plan, but the online curriculum and virtual learning solutions, there are going to be things coming out of the COVID era that will change the dynamic a little bit in how we do education. One of those things is our utilization of online learning, and the high school immediately jumped on ideas to continue with ways to help with some credit recovery issues, and even using online for, in some cases, some long-term suspensions and such. Last year, we had a very high number of requests for online learning. I think there was a lot of worry, understandably so, coming out of the closure. And it actually worked out, even in our primary building, in our intermediate building, where we were able to dedicate full-time employees, full-time teachers, to specific sections of just online learners. The numbers just kind of worked. And actually, in some regards, it the opposite happened. I think Kathy Pregan told us the other night that she actually Kathy was first grade, right? Kathy was first grade. She actually had 28 kids. So in a weird way, it actually helped with class size in the other sections of first grade, because we don't usually run classes that high. Well, we wouldn't run a class that high, so it diminished it. This year, we've known for some time that we aren't going to be able to afford to do that. Somebody said, well, you could maybe build it into this plan. Well, what we can't afford to do is to put a full-time teacher for a grade level who may have 3, 4, 5, or 6 students max, because that's how much lower the requests are. The opposite happens then with the grade level numbers. We pull a full-time teacher over to take just 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe even 10, maybe even 12 in a grade level. The rest of those numbers are going to go into the onlines and spread across the other 9 sections, and they're going to balloon. So regardless, we know that there are families that have medical needs, fragile medical needs, some of them documented with us already through health plans and IEPs, others relative to families who may live in the home and what they may be dealing with from a health-wise situation. So we are utilizing these resources to create outsourced options for our folks to do online learning. The idea is that it's still aligned with our curriculum and how we traverse our curriculum, but they will not be educators from our system. So they will be part of the package that we produce. So I just wanted to touch a little bit more on that. That's why it is absolutely addressing the learning loss piece and why it's appropriate in here. And again, also being creatively used in the secondary level in multiple ways too. So that's all I wanted to add about that.
Then this next slide will show the ESSER 3 with the 80%, the other allowable activities budget. So this is where we have more of the additional staff, the craft and middle school administrative interns, additional classroom teacher at craft, and some additional teachers at Titan Hill as well. We also have custodial and PPE supplies that we'll need to continue to purchase, instructional materials, technology, and building, ventilation, and HVAC projects. So this total budget here is $1.5 million.
Wanted to also mention, and we talked about this back when the board approved these hires, but just as a reminder, and for anyone that may be paying attention online, and for Tim as well, the way we went about the creation of these quote unquote temporary positions is we talked to each building and talked about their needs and what they thought would best serve their situation, which is how we came up with the high school with the counselor and such. The CREFT, for example, you may know I've said before, I've worked for very, very large school districts. I've never in my life, even in a large school district, had a primary building as large as CREFT is for the grades that we serve there. It's a large building. We only have one administrator. This takes a significant time away from our counselor in the building. And so again, thinking about this as a recovery from COVID, it made a lot of sense that now is a time that we maybe try the concept of an admin intern in that role to help with that. But we did ask the principals when we shared these ideas, we asked them to think through possible ways that if there's any chance in a few years that we can retain these positions, it would be done so through attrition. Or if we are just in a really good financial situation, our cost-benefit analysis says this makes sense, continue to do it. But everyone understands, including the hires, that these are temporary positions, but there is a plan where our principals have a little autonomy that they may tell us in a couple of years when it comes to their staffing, you know what, I don't need this, but I'll keep this. So that's kind of the thought process. We don't want to talk about the specificity because that's forecasting, and we don't know how many of those things will come to be. But we think they're some very good use of the money. Human resources are the most valuable tools when it comes to education. And so we're pleased with how those are panning out. And I did, I mentioned the HVAC before. This is relative really to one big project in our middle school. But we're excited to be able to dive in to take a look at that.
Are there any questions on the budget?
We're good?
I just, I don't know, I'm sorry, I don't hold on, let me see if I can speak what's in my brain right now. Additional staff is great. I'm all for human capital, more people working with our kids, but this is one-time money. And I think we can may be able to find a better bang for our buck than hiring teachers for 2 years and then maybe not having to pull them back, because then we're going to be in the same position we were. I mean, that's almost $1 million. I think we could find something we could do to the district infrastructure that helps all the kids in perpetuity, not just possibly without forecasting for 2 years. That's just a thought. I'm not disagreeing with this plan. I'm just saying, is there something that could help LC students for a longer period of time for the same amount of money? I guess is my question.
So we felt pretty strong about these positions, and I have to throw in there that we have to realize that, again, these decisions were made and approved by the board when the ESSER money came out initially. We've contracted these folks, okay? So that has gone forward, and I think we do feel that even with it being something that may not retain kids, whether you're talking about social emotional needs, talking about learning needs, the best thing we can do with them right now is make sure they've got as many champions there to serve them as possible, and many flexibility. The one example I use with CREFT, a counselor is a vital position right now, and when you've got a counselor dealing with discipline issues on a given day, all day long, when you have a day where you don't have the counselor to do that, and the principal is trying to get in and out of classrooms to coach and to help our teachers through difficult situations, but she has to come out and deal with discipline. It's a crucial time where that human capital, we see it, Travis, as being the best thing we could do. And we're not sure it doesn't stick around, because it just depends what happens in the scenario. And again, we planned it in a way that it's at least possible, but it also may not be needed in a few years, and it won't be a full 2 years before we're saying, is this needed? We'll be assessing along the way and planning accordingly. So we really felt when we looked at this and the amount of money, getting into the nickel and diming and, what is this piece we can purchase? What is that piece we can purchase? These were big chunks of money that fell into place, and we just felt strongly about the human capital piece. So I fully understand what you're saying, but there has been a lot of thought that has gone into it all the way back to when we, originally recommended the staff.
I don't disagree with you at all. It's especially as far as when you're talking about counselors dealing with disciplinary problems. I don't think it's, I'm just going to maintain, I don't think it's, if that's needed, which I agree, 100%, it's needed. Why are we using temporary monies to put that in place?
The simple answer to that would be because we don't have $985,000 reoccurring in perpetuity. So it's an opportunity to satisfy some areas that have great impact on children in a very difficult time. And, you know, again, back to the high school counselor that we mentioned in the 20%. There's a lot of high school kids that need that additional guidance, and we would otherwise not have it. We can't find that money elsewhere in our budget. This is additional money relative to the stimulus package that allows us to do it. And so it makes a lot of sense in our minds in trying to put a dent in the situation going forward. But I greatly appreciate all you're saying. So, moving forward, I want to talk just a little bit about the Return to Learn plan. I did put a draft that really isn't a draft anymore. I think this is fully published now, although after tonight, I think Josh is going to go back to making it very obvious and pointed to from our website. It's been out there, but we haven't really in draft form been pointing people to it all that much. The long and short of this is what has changed about our Return to Learn plan are those things relative to state and federal orders. And one other thing, things that we've learned over the course of last year. Primarily, our Return to Learn plan is very, very similar to what we reviewed in great detail last year. In fact, it is largely the same. But there have been some things that have changed since we did that. One of the biggest pieces you may recall is that it is no longer local control of the Board of Education or the superintendent to determine that masks must be worn. That was a big staple in our Return to Learn plan last year. In fact, you know, I applauded the board because when we brought the plan to you, the recommendation was for mandated masks from, I think we had said 4th grade up. And the board asked what public health said about that, and public health actually recommended for all ages, and the board said, then let's do it all ages. So that was something we had the ability to do. That ability is not there anymore. So the verbiage about mask is adjusted all the way through this plan. We have followed the advice of, as this board knows, in many ways per this board, we have followed the advice of our local public health. And I like to remind folks, they often in conversations with me want to point, you know, to our governor or our state department. And I have to remind them that when some of these things were removed through legislation, some of these local control pieces, we went to the governor for advice on who should we turn to, and the guidance we received was to follow our local Department of Public Health. So when a lot of folks say you need to follow the governor, I think they're thinking from sometimes a political mindset, but not from a political mindset, but from a guidance mindset. That's what we did. We followed our local public health. We have all along. We stayed consistent with that. And again, I applaud this board for doing that. We weren't blown around by the wind or by this agency or that agency or these conflicting thoughts or this group or that group. We stayed consistent. My recommendation is we continue to do that. And what public health is saying right now is they recommend the utilization of face coverings, of masks. So we cannot require that. We cannot require staff. We cannot require students, and we can't require visitors. But we can allow it, we can encourage it, and we can acknowledge that we believe it had an impact on our success last year. So we are encouraging the utilization of masks. School activities in school, the only place right now, based on public health, they do not see, based on what they've learned at this time, that's necessary in outdoors. So for example, the high school has an annual pep assembly at the end of the first week of school. Last year they didn't have it at all. This year they're going to have it, but they're going to have it outside. So they're not going to confine the whole student body to closed quarters. So you'll, all through the document, without me reading every every entry to you, anytime there's a discussion about mask, it's reference to a recommendation. Another thing that you'll see different in our return to learn plan is, again, per changes from the state level, we are no longer quarantining exposed students. We don't have the ability, per the state, to quarantine students who have simply been exposed. In other words, asymptomatic. Which means there's really no need to contact trace anymore. Now, we did all of that in conjunction with public health, and we will still take their advice when we have situations that, maybe a group of students and/or faculty, and it makes sense to figure out how we treat that, how we walk through that. But there is no, per the state, ability for us to quarantine asymptomatic students or staff. Our cleaning is going to continue. Our efforts at social distancing, we learned a lot last year, per building. What worked, what made sense, what was feasible, what was not a worthy attempt. In some cases, the ability to have schools our sizes in session, you can't social distance at all times. But we can do our best to keep from clumping students in large groups, as I just said, in assembly form, or when students are dropped off, our dismissal procedures. Students are staying in classrooms instead of filling up gymnasiums waiting for the buses to show up. So those kinds of things will continue. I did want to mention, I sit on the advisory board for Pot County Emergency Management, and Doug Reed, the executive director, is always adamant in saying that he believes when all said and done, we're really going to learn that much of our success also had to do with the equipment that was purchased and the cleaning, I always have to look at the electrostatic. I don't know why that just doesn't stick in my head. It just doesn't. And I've just made a joke out of always turning to Andrea for the reminder. But the fact that we will continue to do that twice a day on our buses, both when they're, to make them fresh, if you will, for the first run in the morning, and then in between the morning and the afternoon, and then all classrooms. And they are very, very effective at killing anything that they touch. And about the only thing they're not reaching is the ceiling when they go in and spray the electrostatic sprayers. I mentioned earlier remote learning option. We are keeping that alive for documented health matters, both with students and with family members. And again, some of that documentation in some cases are things we already have on file, through health plans or IEPs or what have you. If families have a situation where their medical professional is saying, due to this person's health, this child that lives here should not be traveling back and forth to school, we ask for a simple letter so that becomes a documented health concern, and then we will, through the funding provided through ESSER, we will provide that online opportunity. Last thing I wanted to mention, and then we'll see if there are questions. We have reviewed this in multiple ways. Throughout the existence of the COVID situation, there have been times when we have surveyed our community. We have brought a lot of things through our board publicly that we've put on agendas, we've discussed publicly. Leading up to tonight, we did a presentation with a group of our principals and building level stakeholders. This included students, it included parents, it included teachers, and our head principals. We went through the ESSER 3 budget plan. We went through the return to learn plan, had time for them to give feedback to their individual buildings, had time for them to give feedback to us, and we had some very good discussion. It was an engaged meeting, and that was a precursor to bringing it to the board tonight. And after this evening, I have until the 20th, which I think is Friday. Is that right? I have until the 20th to complete my submission to the state on the state's portal. And I'm about 3/4 of the way through that already, so this will be a next step in that. I'll submit that. From there, we'll move forward with our expenditures and our requests for reimbursements. And by the way, I did want to mention earlier too that all of ESSER 1, or the CARES Act, and ESSER 2, that money has all been dispersed and spent, all reimbursed. The first one, again, came to us. The second one, we did it through reimbursement. So we are into requesting the reimbursements for ESSER 3.
I do have a question on the, one of the bullets here, will school close if a child tests positive? With, we never closed last year,
No.
but with, not quarantining, not being able to quarantine students and that, with the positive, results, that will be kept track of, I'm assuming.
Yes,
daily.
they will, and I've been assured that by Public Health that information will still flow back through them. Now, there are home testing kits that they're going to provide us that are a little different than the rapid test that people can buy themselves. The rapid tests really have no way of flowing back through to Public Health. They're rather expensive. I don't know how many people are or are not using them. But if somebody is testing through their doctor, getting an official test, that will funnel back through. It will have about a 5-day lag time this year. So, because Iowa took down their testing sites.
Right.
And I'm not aware of any plans for those to come back up. I also wanted to mention, in that same regard, asking that question because that was relevant last year, people wanting to know, are we going to close down classrooms? Are we going to close down schools? That is also something that is in the control of the state.
Correct.
And I believe what they say, and I'm a little clear on exactly how they interpret it, but we have to have 10% of our students and staff positive for COVID before that idea can be entertained.
Okay.
And again, and it wouldn't be our ultimate decision. We may decide to, it's kind of like applying. We may decide to go to the state and apply for a closure if we need. We're assuming it'll again be in 2-week increments if that would be necessary. We're hoping it won't.
Right. And with the hope it won't, do we have any type of plan for remote?
Yeah, our remote plan would be what we were prepared for last year.
Okay.
What would be prepared for last year. And, we also have, you may recall, although I don't have this in the return to learn plan because it's just connected to, we're in the process of even determining if we would do remote days for snow days to some degree. I think the district and the teachers all see that as a good tool to keep us from going to school well into the summer months. But what we haven't made a final decision on is when that will kick in. Last year, I had made the decision and shared with the board, I think in November, that we would wait until we got to 5 snow days used. If it was 5 by the end of February, or before the end of February, that we would then consider. Well, we got to 5, about 3/4 way through February, I think, and then we geared up and we were ready. All of our schools had a plan and we were prepared, and then we never had any more snow days. So what we're trying to determine for this year is, there's some thoughts that we should do it after 2. There's actually some that have emailed me and said, I think we should do it for all of them. I'm not necessarily in agreement with that, but it's not going to be me making the decision in a vacuum. And some have said 5 again, some have said 3. So we'll figure out the best way to do that. We want to, of course, always think about the best way to deliver instruction to our students. And so to some degree,
Right.
makeup days are good. Extensive makeup days probably become less effective. So we want to find that
Right.
balance.
And then with our students hourly, we were able to cut a couple days. They didn't have to make up the last school year.
Right,
correct?
and we really want people to understand that was an anomaly. That
Right.
was an extensive circumstance because we were one of the few districts that our staff, our teachers, I'm not suggesting other districts didn't work hard, but we had 0 closures due
Correct.
to COVID. And people were worn out.
Right.
And
It was a rough year.
yes.
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 What about event participation? Football, basketball games,
Right.
is there any protocol to that? To
No.
canceling or closure? Okay.
No, the guidance is deferred to the state athletic activities associations, the girls and boys, and their guidelines are pretty much normal. So, again, we can't require, we can all absolutely allow for the utilization of face coverings. We do feel a little bit better based on what I think public health is suggesting, that there's just a little more safety viewed in the outside activity, especially where the positivity rates are right now. If they get to an extreme level, I would expect that to change. But we will follow their guidance.
Are there any other questions or discussion for the return to learn plan and the ESSER dollars, ESSER $3? Okay, thank you very much. We'll go on to discussion items. 7.01, various policy updates due to legislative changes on the second read.
I kind of walked through all of these quickly last time, so I won't do that again. But I think they were all, again, understood as in some cases, just slight wording changes, added paragraphs or removed pieces, all due to legislative changes. Most of them are not required, but much more clear to align them, the language to legislation that has changed, because the legislation, of course, is required, but the language not always has to be specific. There were other policies that were absolutely required by law that I brought to the board right away, and there are a few in here, but we went ahead and did a second read on these because not all of these are required. But I did not have any additional questions about these policies, and there are no changes to what was presented.
Is there any discussion, any questions on any of these policies? All right. We'll go then to 7.02, 603, and 604 series policy reviews, updates, and IASB alignments on the second read.
Couple of things. First of all, I want to remind the board of what I shared about this group. That seems about the average size group that I've been bringing. If you notice, this is almost all keep. A lot of times you'll see, because of either the language updates or the legal references or those kinds of things will cause us to either delete and then add just to make it easy. This is primarily just keeping and renumbering almost all of these. There is one thing I want to point out, and this is my error. Anna and I work on, of course, I work through these reviews. I send them to Anna, and then she puts the packet together and adjusts the policies. And when I created the packet for this board meeting, I went back to a previous, the original sheet I was working from. And the very last policy on there says, add IASB policy 604.10 online courses. Please either mentally or literally put a line through that. That was not on the first read. And the reason for that is I originally had it on the first read. We took it off because Dr. Jones and I discussed it. We do think that because of our additional usage of online, that this is probably a policy we will be adding, but we want to get much more input from the principals, and also it seemed a little bit ahead of when we were still vetting through the products with vendors and such. So when I put this packet together, I didn't adjust my original page that I had sent to Anna and then asked Anna to take that off. So that very last one should just not be included. And we don't say them specifically in the motion, so that's okay. But just if Andrea, for the record, can make sure that it is known that that is not to be on there. Maybe something in the future. Other than that, there were no changes to these policies.
Is there any discussion? I don't know, I was flipping through. Is the wellness plan in on that group?
Yes.
Okay. You have here, there, it looks like the exhibit is crossed off.
Yes, it was, there were duplicates.
Okay.
There were duplicates in how we had those exhibits, and you're gonna have to forgive me for not being able to speak to the details of it. But we basically got rid of the duplications,
Okay.
put them in alignment of where that information was. We also had some of our own exhibits, and we're also aligning, we've been aligning all along with, to make it more consistent with what a regulation is and what an exhibit is. An exhibit is usually a form provided, either the parents would fill out, the staff would fill out, that would require folks, whereas a regulation is always going to be additional guidance for a policy. So just in the process of some of these things being spread out in numerous places, there were recommendations of the review from IASB to not duplicate things when it's not necessary to duplicate things. This was very outdated. Even the people that created this, it was just a very outdated thing.
Right, okay. I had just seen the X's
Yep.
through it, and I just wanted to make sure. Any other questions? All right. 7.03, final 600 series policy reviews, updates, and IASB alignments on the first read.
Smaller group. This will round out our 600 series. We will inch into the 700 series, so we continue to make progress, marching toward the thousands when we will wrap it up. Nothing complicated here. It's kind of a mixed bag. You'll notice that some of those examples I had before, where we delete one and add one, in some cases we are adding some policies. You see at the bottom the adds. Those are some things that law doesn't require us to have, but when we look at them, it makes some sense to have some guidance that we can point folks to that are aligned with our practices. So nothing significant in changes, a lot of alignment with numbers, legal updates, and this is a first read, so there's plenty of time to review and plenty of time to get your questions to me if you have any, and if there are any changes, I'll report those accordingly on the second read.
Is there any questions or discussion on these policies on the first read? All right. 7.04, standards for effective school board self-evaluation. And I can take care of this one. Everyone has received the results. What this is the board evaluated themselves. And we use this as a snapshot on how the board feels about how the board is doing. And there's always room for improvement. There's, if you put a 10 down for something, that doesn't mean that we can't improve. But we, as a board, we always strive to make the best decisions for our students and staff and the LC community. So with this, we'll just go briefly. I'm not going to read everything word for word, but there are 7 standards, I guess, that we evaluated ourselves on. The first one is a visionary team, and the weights or the how we graded ourselves was between a 7 and a 10. And responses, there were a few comments for new construction to enhance new Lewis Central facilities for the future. Another was make board, or the field the board discusses to make sound decisions based on data along with recommendations from the superintendent. The field COVID has taken the board and school in an unprecedented direction the past 1.5 years, and unfortunately it's not over, and the board has dealt with this, keeping safety of our students and staff along with student achievement first in decisions made. This past year is evident with our mitigation efforts to stop the spread of COVID that the board made decisions based on the data, which helped ensure a complete and uninterrupted school year. And that was our first one. The second was student learning, and those numbers were 8s and 9s. And this was, for everyone to know, this was graded between 0 and 10. And so we had 8s and 9s on the second one. Learning growth has remained strong during the pandemic. Student achievement has always been the #1 goal for the board. The urgency and importance of this is included in communication to teachers, admin, and the superintendent. And students' learning has shown strong accelerated growth this year following the shutdown last spring. The next, #3 is district culture. And the numbers the board gave were 9s and a 10. And there were 4 responses. We have a good leadership team. Like to see more information directly from the leadership team individually. Culture keeps getting stronger every year. Superintendent has done an excellent job leading this. Proud of the fact we could be in person with our learning all year this past year. The board supports all teachers in their professional development, along with supporting teacher leaders to share their skills. Not all students learn the same way, and teachers need to use different ways to engage all students. And last comment was, I have received many comments how the culture in the district is so much better. I would like to think the board and our decisions have a little to do with that. #4 is policy and legal. We had 9s and 10s scores. There were 5 responses. The use of IASB as a tool to update our policies has been great. Updates to policies this year. I believe this board does well in following board policy. With the update of all policies to align with the IASB policies, we will continue to be up to date with the state policies and law. I appreciate how we align to the state guidelines. The board continued to uphold the values set forth by previous boards and ensured the highest level of ethics continued to be observed. #5 is fiscal responsibility. We had 7, a couple 8s, a couple 9s, and a couple 10s. The comments, this could be better shared with the board. A guideline of direction was not prepared by the board before a plan was distributed. Good understanding from Andrea of our finances and responsibilities. I feel the board tries hard to be fiscally responsible to provide a good learning environment for our students and staff. Once our large construction projects are finished, we'll be able to review projects and campus needs to keep facilities in good condition, along with supporting new or expanded curriculum for our students with monies available. The regular and routine maintenance of district facilities is critical to the district's financial health. #6 is advocacy. We had 8s, 9s, and 10s, superintendent and board members on local committees attending the school board conference. LC superintendent does an excellent job at being a voice for Lewis Central at local and state levels and shares this information with the board. I feel each board member's involvement is a personal decision each board member must make to advocate for our district. Dr. Canosa and members of the board have actively petitioned the district's state legislative representatives on behalf of public education. The superintendent has forged many relationships in a very short time with the district. And number 7 is board meeting structure. We had 9s and 5 10s that were graded. And there were 3 responses. Streaming the board meetings is a great addition. Addition of streaming board meetings this year continued even after went back to in-person meetings. And I believe meetings follow the posted agenda and run fairly smooth. Board packets have information needed for members to review before meeting, so discussion and decisions can be made. The addition and continuation of live streaming our board meetings is a great asset so our community can watch without attending in person. And then each board member was asked to give a grade, and 42.9% gave a B, and the 57.1%, so over the majority, gave an A. Overall comments, would like to see a board review of facilities, school ground appearances below average for what I expect to see for a world-class desired district. Always room for improvement, but doing a great job overall. I think dealing with COVID pandemic has given the board a different focus, but student achievement has remained our #1 goal. I feel our board works well together with no one having an agenda that takes away from serving our students, staff, and LC patrons. And so I was pleased to see this. We had a couple 7s, some 8s. To me, that's the, 8, 9, 10 is the higher of the grading scale. I did look up Lewis Central grading scale, and with the visionary team, we got a B. I took everyone's numbers, we got a B. Student learning was a B. District culture was a B+. Policy, legal was an A. Fiscal responsibility was a B. Advocacy was a B. Board meetings was an A. And so out of 490 points, we totaled 446, which is 91%, which would be a B+. And so many people put down B or A for our score, our grade. And so I think we did well. I would be concerned if we had a lot of 2, 3, 4s, but I think that as a board, this evaluation gives us an idea that we seem to be on the right track and doing what we can for the students and the staff in the community. Does anyone have any comments on this? Okay. I think it's just a good tool that we can use so we can just see where we're sitting. And I think we're sitting pretty good. So thank you, everyone, for filling that out. And now we will go on. I'll get my agenda back out. We will go on to 7.05. We have an open enrollment request. And per the state of Iowa code, 21.51A, closed session is appropriate to review or discuss records which are required or authorized by state or federal law to be kept confidential. So with that, can I get a motion to go into closed session? So moved. Second. Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Houston?
Yes.
Mr. Stoffer?
Yes.
Mr. Wyledge?
Yes.
Ms. Atkins? Yes. Mr. Hendricks?
Yes.
Mrs. Shepherd?
Yes. Okay, we will be in closed session. Everyone. We are back from closed session. And second part of our agenda, comments and suggestions from the audience or anyone, comments online. Do we have anyone that is joining us? Okay, thank you. All right, we'll go to action items. 9.01, various policies, updates due to legislative changes on the second read.
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the presented IASB policies, legislative related updates included in the 200, 300, 400, and 500 series policies.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Rylage? Yes. Ms. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks?
Yes.
Mr. Houston?
Yes.
Mr. Stoffer?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheffield?
Yes. 9.02, 603 and 604 series, policy reviews, updates, and IASB alignments on the second read.
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the policies currently included in the 603 and 604 series and all accompanying regulations and exhibits as presented on this second reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Ms. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks?
Yes.
Mr. Houston?
Yes.
Mr. Stoffer?
Yes.
Mr. Wyledge,
Yes.
Mrs. Sheffield.
Yes. 9.03, final 600 series policy reviews, updates, and IASB alignments on the first read.
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the policies currently included in the 604, 605, 606, and 505 series and all accompanying regulations and exhibits as presented on this first reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Mr. Houston,
Yes.
Mr. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Wyledge,
Yes.
Ms. Atkins, Mrs. Sheffield.
Yes. 9.04, standards for effective school boards self-evaluation.
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the results of the 2021 standards for effective school board self-evaluation.
Second.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Houston,
Yes.
Mr. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Wyledge,
Yes.
Ms. Atkins,
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Mrs. Sheffield.
Yes. 9.05, open enrollment request for student A.
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to recommend approval and make a motion for student A's open enrollment.
Second.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Wyledge,
Yes.
Ms. Atkins,
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Mr. Houston,
Yes.
Mrs. Sheffield.
Yes. Open enrollment request, student B.
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the request out for student B.
Second.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Wyledge,
Yes.
Ms. Atkins,
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Mr. Houston,
Yes.
Mr. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mrs. Sheffield.
Yes. Open enrollment request, student C.
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the request for student C for an open enrollment out.
Second.
Any discussion? Vote, please.
Ms. Atkins,
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Mr. Houston,
Yes.
Mr. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Wyledge,
Yes.
Mrs. Sheffield.
Yes. And open enrollment request for student D.
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the request for student D for an open enrollment out.
Second.
Got a second? All right. Is there any discussion? Vote, please.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Mr. Houston,
Yes.
Mrs. Sheffield,
Yes.
my apologies, Mr. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Wyledge,
Yes.
Ms. Atkins,
Yes.
and Mrs. Sheffield, you were a yes.
Yes. I wondered how I got up there so fast.
I was, hold on, the rest of us don't get a vote.
I know, no problem. Okay, 9.06, approval of ESSER 3 and return to learn plans presented in reports.
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Hendricks.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the student and the plans as presented in the report section of our meeting.
Second.
Any discussion?
I just would like to say the reason I'm going to abstain is I don't think this is bad use of the money. I just want to make it on record. I just think there could be better. That's all. I agree with the rationale of the administration. I feel strongly that there's other things that could have been done. So I will abstain.
Just for clarification, abstention is usually used when there's some reason you're disqualified from a vote, or that you
Well, I would-
not have the knowledge needed for the vote, but that just
So
legally
you can
speaking,
vote
that's.
no on the motion.
But, or I would like to split up the two, but that's fine.
It's your call either way. There's no
I just-
law or anything of the sort, but that's just the advice that we
Right.
would give, is that an abstention is usually because you don't have knowledge of it, or there's a connection to it or something of the sort.
Okay. And we do have a motion and a second.
Yeah, it's okay to vote no.
So we'll go ahead with that motion. And vote, please.
Mr. Houston,
No.
Mr. Stoffer,
Yes.
Mr. Weilich,
Yes.
Ms. Atkins? Yes. Mr. Hendricks?
Yes.
Mrs. Sheffield?
Yes. Items of interest, future board meetings. Our next board meeting will be August 30th, so we don't have to come on Labor Day. And anything else we need to? No?
Ma'am.
All right, can I get a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? You can stay.